Well, hello everyone. Are you ready for the third episode of what you need to know to set up a home studio for social media? Well, if you do, have you taken your Dramamine? Because we're going to do a talkthrough, and I'm going to be on the handheld. And when I do that, it may be a little bit bouncy, but I think it's important to just to go through to show you some equipment and to give you some idea of how you can set a studio up, at least starting out without spending a ton of money. And then I think next episode we'll do maybe on some microphone and audio basics. So stay tuned. Here we go. Okay, now if I were running one of the studios here, I would have the laptop available to work the audio off of it. And you'll see boom mic for one of the configurations as if I'm going to actually have the studio here and use Studio O for the engineer to do the work. Now this little stand is a little improvised device. It is a light stand. It's a kind of a heavy light stand. You get a little bit of bounce because of the weight of this particular monitor. And I think it's important to be able to see when you motion. You'll also see a fill-in light or infill light, however you want to pronounce it or whatever you want to do it. And we'll have, of course, an old-fashioned camcorder on top using a camera mount. And the rest of it is there is the audio pack that feeds to the camera. And if we step back, we'll see just a typical LED panel light on a light stand. Fairly simple in its regard, and like I say, it has multi-function because it's very flexible. Let's go look in the other room. Now I hope I'm being steady with the camera, and in this particular setup, let me turn that around, we actually have the ability to fire 4 cameras. We got an old camcorder here to give the back action at the studio operation. Of course, a microphone, headphones set. Over there in the corner is another camera. And if we look up, we see we got a little light on a boom. It's kind of a crane. It's got another audio pack down here, 2-channel. And the bottom is a corner full of stuff. Everybody's got to have, if you got a studio, you're going to have a corner full of stuff. But there's a little baby floor light. Of course, the carrying cases for the various stuff. The bags and that kind of jazz. Exercise elliptical, because you got to have one of those in the studio. A timing device. Now you can also use, what I do a lot of times is I'll take a pop-up countdown web timer, and I'll use that to time things on the show, because you can turn the alarm off, but you can click it on there on one of the panels and work. These are old neodymium. I think the top one's fluorescent. Old light stands that kind of fill in. And one of the things that you can do up top, you see the way this is worked. Let me walk over there if I can do it without bouncing the camera too terribly much. You see at the top of that light stand we have a stud. Now it runs down, of course, to this little molygog down there and gets plugged into a light. But now when we look at the back of the monitors, as we slip into here, we'll see another small rig clamp and one of the posts, and we have a camera, one of the cameras right there. Now this one happens to be used strictly for the video conference software, whichever conference software we use. It's for that software alone, so I don't have to mix camera. If we come on around, we see another camera. Now this particular mount is not really intended to go on this television stand. However, the plastic fill buffer here, the little, whatever you want to call it, the little button, I've mounted a little 1/4 stud on it, and I'm able to get another camera mounted on that. Beyond that, it's 3 monitors which have an absolute specific function that we have to have in order to pull the studio work off. labeled because I'm getting old and tired of chasing down USB cables. And of course a PC capable of running quite a bit of graphics. Now, we had to move a hat because you got to have hats everywhere. And I don't know if you can see down there. It always helps to have about 6 pairs of glasses. Now, I do have telephone what's the word I'm looking for? Telephone integration, so I can actually do a call in on the telephone. I can either patch it through the studio work, either as like a call-in show, or the guest. I can do the guest through that if for some reason we cannot get a video signal in from this side. Now, if I go around to the back, now this is a strained position. I apologize for the video shakiness of the handheld. Now the studio I run in the center panel. That's the actual OBS type of studio software. Now to the left, where we have the other camera, the other web camera, I use it for the studio integration, the guest integration through any number of type of online video conferencing software, Zoom, GoTo, and Skype. You can also run any of them. Anything that you may display on that monitor, you can capture. And on this side, we do have to run all of the engineering streams so that we can see our audio stream. If we have any sound clips we want to run, we can do those. And if we have web pages we need to pull up, we pull them up on that monitor, on the right monitor, as well as being able to use it for our YouTube or Facebook stream data, so we can keep an idea of our stream strength and that sort of thing. Also our countdown timers, if we're going to have a countdown timer to the next segment or to a commercial, something like that, we can do that. And basically this thing is set up to mimic a studio for a radio program. And of course there we have over there the telephone that I mentioned earlier, and of course the back camera, backside camera number at the left. We have one on the right, and the little cables you see there are for the various charging and unloading of the video streams. So it's a fairly straightforward thing. And as I point out, let me go up top. Instead of that heavy light, we can take a camera, a USB camera, and place it in position using a setup something like we use for this particular camera, if you can see that. So this camera is really very light. And if you're doing a cooking show or an assembly overhead, maybe a quilting, anything like that, you can take something like this flashpoint light stand and run a cable up top. Instead of having that little par light up there, you can actually have a camera up there. And of course, as you see in the back, see if we can walk over to it without balancing too bad. You see here, we have another webcam. And it actually goes along the bottom with a USB cable, extension cable. So you have a lot of ability to make things work based upon what you have available, and you don't necessarily have to spend a ton of money to do it. Now I do have some sound abatement panels built up here. There is a video on that. I should put it together and give it to you guys. But it's a home, it's a studio, it's a home studio. Now be creative. Now I'm going to show a little bit and talk a little bit about the crane, my improvised crane, which is no more than a light boom set up where I can change that stuff on the head. Now you can pay for a crane. A good crane will run you, depending on the height and the reach of it, will run you probably $10,000 to $20,000, maybe more, with a good electronic gimbal head on it and reinforcement, so it's nice and floaty and you don't have the problem. But for a lot of home stuff, little things like this. Now you'll recognize that as nothing more than a camcorder on the end of a baby tripod. And of course, using a little small rig there. We have a little clamp. We moved it from the setup over here to right here, clamped it on there, and that's going to give us our wireless audio. And we can then aim it straight down at the table. Now we're going to do the talk about the other in just a second. You have to forgive the shakiness. This is handheld. And you see from this angle, this is the end of the light boom. And you see it does have a little bit of a wobble to it. So it's not quite like a crane. But you can put your post in either horizontally or vertically here, and you just turn your screw, clamp it down. And if you use the post system, it works pretty well. You can kind of wait for the bounce to settle down, the camera to settle down, and then go from there. And it's nice if you have a remote controlled camera or you're using a USB webcam, because then you can wait for it to stop. Now there are different ways to get certain shots. Now I've shown you at the opening, kind of in this second half, I've shown you just using a little, a baby tripod on a kitchen table. I mean, it works a flat surface and then you can present from there. I also showed you a little bit on that light boom that I was using in lieu of a crane. Now a crane, you have motion and you're able to rise up and get the kind of aerial shot while simultaneously tilting and keeping the object in frame and that kind of good jazz, and tilting and rotating back and zooming and all that kind of motion, and it's very smooth and does a wonderful job. That's not what we're doing here. We're just looking for some way to hold a camera above a subject matter, such as a table, a cooking surface, a stove, anything like that. So I'm just telling you, be a little creative in your studio work. This is a stud like you would have here for a light stand, and of course this is an old-fashioned incandescent light. Now I have here, if I can position it correctly in the frame, where it'll show up, looks halfway straight. Let me tilt it a little bit. Here we go. Now this is an old-fashioned light, the one you saw in there when we walked through. And that's almost 2 pounds. Now we want to go, so we want to think, if it'll hold up that, it'll do okay. Now if a light bounces a little bit, unless you're seeing shadows going back and forth, bouncing like this, it's not going to be a problem. But you have other options. One thing is we have these little small heads for camera mounts, and they work. This is a silk, and it just, you pop off, you put your camcorder here, something that's fairly light, and of course this is a small, lighter model. You can then take a stud, a 1/4-20 stud, if in case that's what that has, and put that in there. So now you're adding about a pound, not quite a pound, 3/4 of a pound, something like that on it, plus the pound that you would have of the camcorder itself. But there's something else you can do beyond that. If you're going to use something like OBS Studio and you're going to do kind of live stream or use the studio to do your recording, you can also, and you have a PC, you can also make use of webcams like this little guy, and it's about 3 ounces. Okay, and you say, well, how can I get a computer webcam that goes over a monitor? How do I get that on to my overhead shot? Well, here's something you might recognize as a ball mount. So a little cheap ball mount. You can take the flash piece off, and then you have a 1/4-20 stud. Then with a 1/4-20 stud, you can, if I can do this, still trying to keep it in frame, there we go. Okay. Now we have this on a ball mount. We have a male stud here. Well, this, if we take this loose, most of these, this will come out, and you'll have a place to take the stud, and you can then screw the stud into the lighting stud into the ball mount. And with this, now you can pretty well much adjust however you need that head to go, one way or another. And of course, in the mount, you can put it in sideways, so this can either go in sideways into the stand, or it can go lengthways in the end of it like that. But either which way, you have an ability to kind of position it. And what you need simply is a long USB cable to connect to your computer.